this session that we have today is the first episode of the 4 series about the renewable energy that we're going to have. Arefeh kindly going to present us about her expertise in the wind energy in this section. Hopefully you're going to enjoy it. Arefeh Jan, start.
Sure. Thank you very much, Aida Jan. So I'm just trying to set everything up before I start. So hi everyone again. And thank you, Aida Jan, for the introduction. So today I'm gonna kick off this webinar series about the renewable energy, and I'm gonna talk about wind industry. I call it a quality of wind power, and I get to the point why I call it that. But before I start the conversation about the wind, I'm gonna give you a little, very brief introduction on what renewable energy is. And then I take you through my journey and tell you why I'm here today and I'm talking about the wind. And then I'm gonna hopefully talk about the history of the wind industry, where we are right now and where we are heading to. So renewable energy. What is renewable energy? Very simple words. Any sort of energy that is endless, that is sustainable, you cannot run out of, is renewable energy, like the sun or the wind. I've listed a few other types of renewable energy sources here. And as already mentioned, throughout this webinar series, we're going to touch base a couple of these different types of sources. And hopefully then we will talk about the concept of storing the energy, as well as the whole strategic thinking behind this transition from fossil fuel to the renewable sources in the future. But today I'm going to talk about the wind. My journey, well, it started in Iran, I guess. I did my undergrad degree in electronics engineering at the University of Tehran. I'm very proud of that. And being a part of that university, being a part of that organization. Then I moved to the UK in 2008, and I did my master's and a PhD at the University of Sheffield. I'm very proud of Sheffield too. During my PhD, my thesis was about electron microscopy of semiconductor materials and devices. I'm not going to go into the detail of that, but the whole idea of electron microscopy and looking at the microscopic level to the different designs of the products opened the door to the whole new world of reliability studies and failure analysis to me. And that's what I did. After I finished my PhD, I started as a failure analysis engineer, looking at the failure modes and reliability of the different products and how I can feed back to the design and improve that. Then I think I grew into that role to not only look at the product, but also look at how the process that delivers that product can be improved as well. So I think 3 years ago it was that I joined FT, almost 3 years. I joined FT Technologies specifically to coach and train the supply chain to improve their processes and the products, the reliability of the products that they deliver to us, so that the end product that we deliver to our customers have the high reliability and the quality that the customers expect. And you might think, well, where the wind sits in all of that? Well, I have to tell you a little bit about FT. FT Technologies is a company that we actually design and manufacture wind sensors. You see, for the wind turbine to have the maximum efficiency. The blades should always rotate and face the direction of the wind. And the wind sensor exactly commands and directs the wind turbine to do that. Also, it captures the speed of the wind so that when, let's say, there is a tornado coming and there is a risk of a damage to the turbine, or maybe a health and safety issue because the tornado has such a high speed wind that can cause critical damages to the turbine and can cause safety issues or hazards around it. Again, the wind sensor commands or informs the turbine to stop working and all of that. So this is what FD does. And this is how I think I joined the community of people who are involved in the whole conversation of renewables. I remember when I did my second interview with FT and they were asking me, why are you excited to join us? I was like, well, it's renewable. It's a whole future. Of course I was excited. But so to talk about wind, I think it's fair to say that we have to talk about the turbines first. The fascinating, beautiful equipment that you see all over the country, not only the UK, but all over the world. So I gathered a few interesting facts that I'm going to take you through. So hopefully it's not going to be very boring for you guys. First, I want you to, in the chat box, I want you to write your estimate of how old the concept of wind turbine is. And this image probably gives you an idea. I'm not talking about the modern conventional wind turbines, the idea of using the power of the wind to do something for the human. So go ahead in the chat box, tell me what you think. Don't be shy. And then I'm going to share some facts with you. I give you some, good, 5,000 years, 12,000 AD. Don't cheat, don't Google. Okay, 500 years, okay, interesting. Well, I think there is no exact answer to that. I couldn't find any exact answer to that, but the oldest record, one of the oldest records I could find was back in 10 to 70 AD, and it was the wind wheel of Hero of Alexandria, who was a Greek engineer and a mathematician, and he was, I think, living in Roman Egypt. But interestingly, the very first known practical wind power plants were actually built in Sistan, Persia, now Iran, in the 7th century. This is towards the end of Sasanian era, I think. And these wind turbines that you see here, they were used to bring the water up to the surface of the earth. And also they were used for grinding and milling grains. But I think in Europe, the wind power first appeared in the Middle Ages. Towards the end of 19th centuries, though, it was that I think the first electricity generating wind turbine was designed, this photo, and it was designed by a Scottish engineer. Almost the same time, the very first automatically controlled, operated wind turbine, this photo, was designed in the US. So I think by 1930s, most of the farms in the US had wind turbines which were generating electricity. And I think in many countries in Europe as well, like Denmark. I'm sure you know Denmark is a big name in wind industry. But it was around 1940s, beginning of 1940s, that the very first megawatt class wind turbine was introduced, and it was connected to the utility grid, to a utility grid in the US. And in the UK, I think a decade later, it was introduced to the utility grids as well. And I think that is when the utility companies were in the equation, was that the whole industry boosted and rapidly improved. Before I go into the information about where we are today with the wind turbines and the whole industry, I just want to quickly give you an idea, a simple idea of how a wind turbine works. You see, I already mentioned that the wind turbine, if it faces the direction of the wind, we will have the maximum efficiency of the wind turbine. The turbine blade doesn't have a flat shape. It has a curvy shape, and it causes for the wind to travel two different distances on two sides of the turbine blade. And because of the different distances that the wind travels, we end up with a lower air pressure on one side compared to the other. And that causes the blade to lift and rotate towards the low pressure side. And that causes the whole thing to rotate. Rotation of the blades generates magnetic field inside the coil that sits inside the wind turbine. And if you remember from our physics courses in high school, magnetic field causes electricity to be generated and going out from the coil. And that's the very basic rule that bases the whole design of the wind turbines, if you will. And so this simple idea evolved and improved throughout the years. And now we have these beautiful equipment all over the country. Even in Iran, I remember when I was a kid, and we were like traveling on the car. We were driving from Tehran to up north in Rasht in Gilan, and we were passing the area of Rudbar and Manjil. I remember I could see these beautiful tall turbines, and I was always fascinated by them. I wanted to know how they work, how they generate electricity and all of that. So nowadays, there are many names out there who are actively working in designing and manufacturing the wind turbines. Here is another question I want to ask from you, and I'd like to ask our host to kindly publish the poll. It's a poll with multiple choices. I want you to guess the length of the longest wind turbine blade. And please, again, don't Google, just go ahead with your, instincts. How do you feel? What do you think it is? And then we will share some facts. Don't be shy, just, choose something wonderful. Should I give it another few seconds? Yeah, right. So Mahtab John, please publish the results. That's fascinating. Well done, everyone. So actually, the answer is 107 meters, and most of you guys were correct. Well done. And this blade was specifically designed for should I remove this from the, sorry. So this blade was specifically designed for GE's 12 megawatt wind turbine. And this is the world's most powerful wind turbine to date. To give you a perspective what 12 megawatt wind turbine means, one single turbine can power up to 16,000 European households. That's how massive it is. I forgot to mention, this turbine is a offshore turbine, and probably all of you know what I mean by offshore, but these are the wind farms that are not on the land, but rather in the sea. The whole idea behind the offshore industry is the fact that the downside of the wind turbine, wind industry in general, is the fact that it's unpredictable. You don't know if today is windy and if tomorrow isn't, and all of that. And there are very limited areas all over the world on the land that have wind all year round. But you have more opportunity of getting a consistent wind speed offshore. And the whole idea of offshore wind turbines comes from there. As probably all of you guys know, the UK is the leading country in the whole offshore industry. And I don't know if you've seen it when you're like on the plane and traveling back or traveling from the UK. Before the lockdown, there are so many different wind farms all over the sea around the country. One of the biggest offshore wind turbines that I know of is the Hornsea wind farm, which is off the Yorkshire coast. It has 174 turbines, and its capacity is 1.2 gigawatt. 1.2 gigawatt is, again, to give you a perspective, it powers up around 1 million households. So it's massive. And the expectations and the forecast from the Global Wind Energy Council is that the offshore industry will grow from 29 gigawatt that is right now to 190 gigawatt by 2030. So I'm gonna share a few slides now that are like some graphs that are either coming from this organization that I already mentioned, Global Wind Energy Council, or they're coming from the International Renewable Energy Agency. And my friends here are going to share the links to these two websites. If you are interested, it's very fascinating. There are loads of information there about the renewable energy in general, as well as the specific wind industry, if you are interested at all. But the slides that I have, the first one, this is showing the new installations of the onshore and offshore wind turbines in the past 5 years. If you look at last year, in total, we had 60.4 gigawatts of new installations. 54.2 gigawatt was onshore and 6.1 gigawatt was onshore. I'm gonna dig into these numbers a little bit. From the 54.2 gigawatt, if you look at the market for that, China goes on top, then the US, then India, Spain, Sweden, and so on. So China is leading. Looking at the offshore, the new installations offshore, the 6.1 gigawatts, again, China is leading with 39%. Then comes the UK, then Germany, Denmark, Belgium, and the rest of the world. I have the total numbers as well here. The total installations onshore, we have 621 gigawatts right now. Well, these are the numbers in 2019, so we have improved since. But again, China comes first, then the US, Germany, India, Spain, and so on goes the rest of the world. And offshore, as I already mentioned, UK is leading this with 33% of the whole installation of the offshore wind energy has market in the UK. Then Germany is following very closely, then Republic of China, Denmark, Belgium, and the rest of the world. If we look at this year 60.4 gigawatt, again, in the total market, China comes first, the US, then United Kingdom, India, Spain, and other countries. And if I want to show you how this new capacity is distributed by region, 50% of it was set up in Asia, more than a quarter was in Europe, then North America, Latin America, at the bottom comes Africa and Middle East. The next one, well, this is the annual investment in the wind energy in the past decade. And it shows a very steady growth, 3.84% growth, overall growth in the past 10 years. If you look at the forecasts, it kind of tells you that steady growth will continue in the next 5 years as well. So we have roughly 4% growth in the next 5 years as well. You see most of it is onshore, but offshore is picking up as well. But I think what I wanted to show you, this is those new installations, for the forecast of the new installations by region. And you see how China is dominating every year in the market. So they are spending a lot of money on that. But the most interesting thing I wanted to show you, and I think all of us can relate to it a lot, is this graph. This comes from the IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency. And it sort of shows you which percentage of the whole electricity that is generated every year is generated by different sources of energy. Only 3 years ago, in 2017, 25% of the whole electricity in the world was coming from renewable sources. But the idea, the target / forecast is that by 2050, we will increase that massively to 86%. I don't know what you call this color. I'm gonna call this light blue. This light blue is the wind, onshore and offshore. You see how beautifully and rapidly the wind industry improves and takes up the market in the next 3 decades, from that tiny bit to this big chunk by 2050. This is the end of my slides. Now, I think the idea is that I don't want to talk too much. I think 25 minutes or so is enough. I'd like to now have a dialogue with you and have your questions, and I try to answer the questions as much as I can, or I can refer you to websites or reads that you can have and learn a bit more if you're interested at all. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Arefeh.